You're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's America's Talk radio show about opera. It's Opera Box Score. I'm George Cedarquist, joined this week by Weston Williams and Ashley Hardgrave, and yes, even Matt Cummings. Get to that in a second. All right, in this episode, it's the Mother's Day show. Matt and Weston make you grateful that whatever your issues are with your mother, at least she ain't Clytemnestra. And then listener mailbag entries abound from NYC. Plus, in the 2-minute drill, hey, can we live without the phone for just one damn hour? Jeez. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast, Stitcher and Spotify. You're going to click follow. Apple Podcasts, hit the plus sign. It's that easy. Send us that voice memo. Email us your hot takes, operaboxscore@gmail.com. You're going to get the OBS beer coaster, the OBS lapel pin, just for sharing your own hot take. I just placed an order for another batch of lapel pins.
Ooh,
and
they're selling like hotcakes.
The new lapel pins are going to be matte finish, not glossy.
Fancy. Are they going to have pictures of Matt Cummings on them? Is that what that means?
They will not.
Nice. Weston, I don't want it.
It's called the most exciting 2 minutes in sports. It's the Kentucky Derby. Did you win any money?
I won absolutely nothing. I bet that they'd be racing greyhounds, and I was very confused. So I was kind of starting at a disadvantage there.
No, that is a sport that should be banned.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, 7 horses die. Come on.
Yeah, that was a dreadful, dreadful string of deaths at the Kentucky Derby this year.
Yeah, but you know what was not dreadful? All of the black quarterbacks that got picked up in the first round of the NFL draft. So there were 3 black quarterbacks that got picked up in the first round. Bryce Young ended up going to the Panthers. CJ Stroud went to the Texans. Anthony Richardson went to the Colts. That is progress, and it's very exciting.
Oh, that's exciting. I did watch a rerun of the Kentucky Derby. It is the most exciting 2 minutes in sports. I always try and pick a winner just as the gates open, and I never win anything at all. Let's talk some opera.
Chalk Talk on Opera Box Score.
It is the Mother's Day episode here on Opera Box Score, and that means that we want to, sit down here with you, our listeners, and really go through our mommy issues with you. And what better way to do that than by sitting down and analyzing Strauss's Elektra?
And who better to pay tribute to mothers than Weston Williams and me? We said, Ashley, you always get to talk about mothers. It's our turn.
We had such a positive, 1-2 years ago? We had such a positive episode with mothers talking about their experiences in opera and, performance. And we're like, let's talk
about an opera where no one wants to be a mother except for one character who's like the weirdo because she's too well adjusted.
Yeah. Elektra is just one of those operas that, it is an iconic piece of early 20th century Freudian, Jungian mishmash of family angst, which makes sense because it's based on the ancient Greek series of plays all about the curse of the house of Atreus. If you don't know what that is,
not a lot of good family stuff happening with that house of Atreus. When last we met our heroes.
People are getting baked into pies. There's murder. There's incest. I believe, isn't it Odysseus who finally breaks the curse and he has to do his whole Odysseus thing? It's just an absolute mess. But where we find the opera, and I think where the allusion to motherhood and family really comes into play is in Elektra, and it really comes to the forefront in this adaptation.
So we talked about the characters of the House of Atreus. The actual patriarch of that house has since been murdered. Agamemnon, who was a Greek general, with the king who was the main general in the Trojan War. He was married to Clytemnestra, sister of Helen of Troy, the central inciter of the Trojan War. He comes home from war and is murdered by his wife and her manstress, Aegisthus.
May I just say, keeping it all tied into the theme here, bad thing for a mom to do.
Yeah, not great to kill the father. And part of the reason why she had decided that she had to murder Agamemnon is because he sacrificed one of their children, Iphigenie, to get good winds for the war.
Maybe not great father then, but who's keeping score? Who's counting?
Nor were the winds that great. That war famously took a very long time. So their remaining two children from the actual myths and another child that was invented by Sophocles. The two children from myth are Elektra, their daughter, and Orestes, the son, who is going to be the Avenger. And then there is this invented daughter, Chrysothemis, who is she is contrasted with Elektra by being the normal, well-adjusted one who just wants people to get along. Elektra, however, is not just in mourning and in denial, but she has like fully sublimated every single aspect of her humanity over towards like rage and bloodlust towards her mother and Aegisthus. She is living in the courtyard, in the stables. The first scene of the opera is all the maids talking about how absolutely off her rocker Elektra has become, because she is basically just this feral creature who hates her mother and wants her dead and has no other reason for living. And so this opera was an adaptation of the Sophocles play, but you really see the influences of of the early days of psychoanalysis, with the Freudian, Jungian ideas of what drives people and what they're looking for, and what sort of motivations there are, as well as like the expressionist and modern influences of things like dissonance and kind of this stream of consciousness narrative. There's a lot of, symbols that don't actually mean anything. They are just symbols to represent abstract concepts like rage or like losing your identity, and really can't be interpreted literally. You could just say they can't be interpreted literally, but often they're sexual as well. Because this is also very Freudian. Freud was very much the rage around this time period. And I will say, I might make some hardcore Freudians a little bit mad when I say this. I don't know how many of those there are these days. But Freud, essentially what he was doing as a sort of pseudo philosopher, early psychologist, was really slash pervert. He really would reach into ancient Greek ideas. Like I think the big go-to example, id, ego, and superego, is literally lifted from Aristotle. Freud came up with that, Weston.
But these kinds of things, like it is very much in the tradition of psychoanalysis at this period of time to look back at ancient Greek myths and try to pull out the essential part of those myths without the trappings of modern society, and just like stripping down the family to its core and what was viewed by the intelligentsia of the time as being this weird sort of weirdly almost perverted, family unit that's often in we're talking about, royalty in Europe, literally incestuous. There's very much a relevance. The thing when I was doing research for this, I actually found out that the term the idea of the Elektra complex actually came 4 years after this opera, which kind of blew my mind a little bit. I had no idea. That's of course the Jungian answer to the Oedipus complex, basically the gender swapped version of that.
Yeah, that girls are competing with their mothers for the affection of their
exactly.
fathers.
And you can really see that idea in this play really stripped down to its bare essentials in the opera through this modernist lens of like, this is the essential, gross, corrupt sexual humanity at the center of all this. It's
such a great pairing with Greek drama, because so many of the important moments of Greek drama have to deal with this like chain of confrontations,
right? Which
is very much, it comes from the Sophocles, and it's very much how Hofmannsthal continued to structure the libretto, and by like weaving those psychosexual ideas of the pathological hatred that every character seems to have for each other, this self-perpetuating cycle of violence, and the sexual aberration that's really like at the root of all of this conflict. He took something that was from antiquity and really like brought it roaring into the early 20th century, where it met up with Richard Strauss, who was in his expressionist era, rejecting traditional beauty in order to convey the powerful feelings of music. There's a couple quotes from the philosopher, music critic Theodor Adorno about eliminating traditional music's conventional elements, everything formulaically rigid, to create this sort of primal scream, so that anything that's harmonious and affirmative is banished, and it really lives in the conflict and like in the bad place. And
very much so.
It's essentially like almost 2 hours of very dissonant waltzing that you're asked to do, and that kind of
lots of dance music,
that contrast is part of what makes the opera so compelling, and what makes these characters both so complicated but also so easy to understand as full people instead of as just tropes.
Yeah, exactly. This is, and I see here another Adorno quote. Also, I hate jazz, but that doesn't really apply here. Let's turn now to this is Mother's Day. We're talking about moms here, so let's focus for a moment on the least favorite daughter. Our good titular friend Elektra.
The least favorite still living daughter.
Least favorite still living. Yeah, okay. We got the list here, the flow chart of where she lies in the family hierarchy. What's her deal, Matt?
So she has really been driven basically to the point of madness by this lust for revenge to her father's death. All she thinks about is killing her mother and her lover that have so betrayed the family by murdering Agamemnon when he returned from war. The only joy that she experiences in the whole opera come from this thought of revenge. And she has become so unrecognizable in her current existence. She's living in the stables. Her own brother, Orestes, when he does come back in disguise, spoiler alert, doesn't even recognize her. And she sings this short kind of monologue to how she sacrificed everything about her looks and everything about her identity, but it's all kind of worth it because like she knows where the axe is buried, and she's going to make sure that death comes to those who deserve it. Her music is really anchored by the Agamemnon theme, that that is the bum 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 fanfare that opens the opera, and really anchors down her monologue right at the beginning, because she is just obsessed with him. And this may show how she cherishes her idea of childhood compared to this almost dystopian life that she's living right now. This idea of being her father's daughter is really has taken over her full identity.
Yeah, I don't want to be an armchair psychologist here, but it sounds like she might have a bit of an Elektra complex.
There are times in the opera where she talks about other things, but they're almost always manipulating those characters. Like she has a couple interactions with her younger sister Chrysothemis, and we're going to talk about their relationship later. But the second one of these big scenes is like almost a seduction scene, where she sings to her about like how strong she is and how ready she is to be able to like come in and take up arms and be a partner in murdering their mother. But this dream of retribution like fully possesses her and becomes her everything. And in some ways this embodies a rejection of the expectations of women at the age. It's a rejection of everything that the society going to see Elektra in 1909 would have considered to be the trappings of humanity and especially femininity.
Yes, very much so. This is very much a time when I feel like we tend to associate the Victorian era with being kind of uptight and constricted, which certainly was the case in a lot of ways. But there was also this breakdown, this early modern radical reinterpretation of what communities and families could and should be. Or in the case of this really early, 1909 to 1915-ish, what families are but should not be. There's a sense that, if you strip away the trappings of this like overly polite, overly mannered society, this is what you get. You get this ugliness. You get this absolute despair that you can hear in this, primal scream in her first aria, Allein, wie ganz allein, alone, wholly alone. It's just it is so deep, and it just digs in you.
And a lot of the ways that Strauss chooses to depict this, to depict her character, is by giving her by far the widest range of musical, both in terms of like actual range of notes that she has to sing, and also range of styles, so that she's always slithering in and out of her actual like primal pain and into these kind of manipulative modes where she's trying to coax people into helping her get what she wants, which is revenge against her mother. And this utter rejection of anything related to familial love, of anything related to motherly duty, would have been a very, very shocking 115 years ago, and was meant to be. So let's hear a little bit of a clip of how one of our Hall of Fame members handles this musical moment from that opening monologue. This is the clip of Astrid Varnay in her full recording of the opera, singing Allein wie ganz allein.
Absolute range of what the orchestra is doing is wild. Harmonically, orchestrally, this opera was doing something that you had never really seen before. It gets about as close as you can get to that, that line that says atonality lies beyond, but the way Strauss starts constructing phrases, especially in Allein wie ganz allein, orchestral phrases and timbres especially, is very much doing what he's doing, what Hofmannsthal is doing in the libretto. It's breaking down this family unit into its primal psychological impulses. Strauss really starts in Elektra composing on overtones in a really interesting way, which he does even more later on in, especially in Frau ohne Schatten and Rosenkavalier. But the way he builds these big brassy and string chords, finding harmonics that resonate on a primal level but don't really fit in with the conventional diatonic way of composing, really gives you the sense that things are not just broken because of a normal family structure. This is something broken at the core of these people having this conflict.
And he deploys it in such specific ways. And I think especially in the confrontation that kind of is the linchpin of the opera, the second of the three big confrontations that Elektra has with these other characters in her family, and that is the one with Mommy Dearest, Clytemnestra herself.
The titular mother for the Mother's Day episode. Yeah, she's a piece of work. As we know, she did have her other daughter get sacrificed, so that might explain why she's a little mean. But I do want to say, this is very much an opera where it strips away a lot of the backstory, so you don't necessarily know that in this presentation, and you just get Elektra's perspective as like a daughter who doesn't necessarily fully understand her mother as a person, but knows that what she has done since she's been old enough to understand, you know, why these decisions are being made. These decisions have been terrible.
Yeah. And what you do know is that even though Clytemnestra absolutely despises Elektra and you know, wants her banished, wants her locked away in a tower, the child that she's afraid of is the one who is not there, of Orestes. So she brings her whole retinue out into the courtyard to get Elektra's perspective on these horrible, horrible nightmares that she has been having. What do you think about these terrible dreams of Orestes who are haunting me? Can I sacrifice a horse? Can I sacrifice a goat? And Elektra kind of goes, no, it has to be a person. And she says, oh, which person? And Elektra goes, oh, you know which person. And Clytemnestra's like, I don't know which person. Please tell me. I need to know this. I need to know this right now.
I will kill literally anybody to stop having these dreams.
And Elektra's like, it's you, ya bitch.
And once again, Freud, dream interpretation. There you go. It's all in one great package.
And so Clytemnestra's music in this whole scene is marked by this lack of tonality. It's usually bitonal, meaning the music's kind of in two keys at the same time, and with like a lot of whole tones. Which, when you take out any sort of half step from a scale and just have whole tone, then if all the notes are the same relationship to each other, really any note could be any note. And so whole tone and bitonal music like that tends to make you feel very adrift. You have no kind of anchor, no home base where you feel like you're coming back to at rest. George Bernard Shaw described this scene as, is there anywhere such an atmosphere of malignant and cancerous evil as we get here? And that really comes across in the music, that kind of the rotting away of any kind of tonal or cultural order. One of the musicologists who's written about this opera a lot calls it a contaminated residue of otherness that can neither be contained nor banished.
Ooh, juicy.
And if you think about what got us here from the perspective of Clytemnestra, it's not only her rejection of her children and her hatred for her children, but it's also her still experiencing her own sexual desire, something that's not very motherly in the idea of early 20th century restrictive views of what it means to be a woman in society. And Elektra really wants her mother dead as much for infidelity towards her father as for the murder itself.
Yeah.
So let's hear a little bit of this like crude and chromatic music that Strauss writes for Clytemnestra that is really supposed to make your stomach churn.
After hearing that clip, you know what comes to mind? Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day, everyone.
I mean, the music really is so like guttural and just, you know, it's disturbing, but not in the way you would expect music written in 1909 by most composers to be disturbing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's such a great expression of who she is as a character, as a mother. We know exactly what we're supposed to feel about her, but the music doesn't give us any clue as to why she's that way. You know,
no,
it's
you're just
like,
dropped in the middle of this courtyard, and you have to figure out with your own gut instincts as much as anyone else does.
She's literally a force of nature. We didn't play a clip earlier, but even her entrance music just builds to this terrifying crescendo, like a it reminds me of like the giants coming over the hill in Rheingold, you know. But it's just a mother. But that's again in this Freudian era that we're talking about.
Mother is monster.
Mother is monster, and no mother is more monster than Clytemnestra.
And so the third prong of this trident of women of the House of Atreus is the composite character, the invented character, Chrysothemis. And she, in many ways, is the most straightforward character in terms of her wants and her willingness to play the role that would be sketched out for her in a normal society. She's the domestic sister. She longs for normalcy and is constantly begging Elektra to stop seeking vengeance so that she, Chrysothemis, can get married and have kids and have a normal life. She doesn't want to protest or seek vengeance against their mother. And so when Elektra greets her at her first entrance in the opera, she refers to her as daughter of my mother. She's linked to Clytemnestra. There's a contrast that's drawn immediately. And what Strauss does throughout the opera is he goes back and forth between them being at opposite poles of their relationship, and to have them like weaving in and out of each other's voices, like fully of the same, fully united in terms of what it is that they're doing at the end. I would not call Chrysothemis stable. She's just as desperate as everyone else. It's just that she's desperate for what she's supposed to want.
Right.
And so her music is that one writer described it as almost being overripe. It's very old-fashioned compared to everything else that happens in this opera. It's really clear-cut in its tonality, and it's almost like vulgar in terms of how much melody there is when she sings about how she wants to have what women want.
Yeah, it feels confined in a way that Elektra, as deeply depressed as she gets in all of her music, she feels so free tonally to do whatever she wants, and Chrysothemis is just like, you know, she's society. She's just the boring cookie cutter wife in this truly atrocious situation. It's always so funny to me whenever I see this opera, because
you're like, oh, here's the E flat major section.
Directors have so much trouble like dressing her up in a way that makes sense for the music, right? Because usually the background is like cracked, dark, bloody, ancient Greek, and Chrysothemis just kind of comes in as like, here's my okay music. And I'm like, why are you like this? It's more concerning that you're not like the others. You know?
She's a reaction against her mother just as much as Elektra is. She just goes in the opposite direction. So at the end of the opera, Clytemnestra is dead. Orestes has killed both her and Aegisthus. Elektra is fully unleashed. This is the fulfillment of all of her desires, of her innermost, id, and the earlier seduction kind of her sister that we talked about before. And she dances herself to death in ecstasy, which approaches not just as a happy ending, but as like kind of the only ending possible. There's nothing left of Elektra once her mother is dead, because her revenge has been consummated.
Some people will literally dance to death in an ecstasy of vengeance rather than go to therapy.
And Elektra's ecstasy here is so much that it can even sweep her sister away on the wave with her. She, they sing this duet where their voices intertwine and they take turns being the top voice. But she hopes that her life can begin at last, but eventually she rejects this union with Elektra, and runs back over to Orestes and has to really uphold these values of society that are just too central of her to give up. And the fact that Chrysothemis, the Marschallin, and Zerbinetta were all premiered by the same singer remains one of those facts that you just can't make up.
That's so bizarre.
When you hear this clip of this outro clip, both from the one before of Deborah Voigt and this outro that we'll play for you in a second of Deborah Voigt and Alessandra Mark, just try to picture her singing Großmächtige Prinzessin.
And with that, we can say from all of us here at Opera Box Score, Happy Mother's Day.
And we hope your children aren't planning to kill you this weekend.
Yeah, you got something to say? Then yeah, all right, you can say something. This is Listener Mailbag.
Into the Listener Mailbag, we got two entries this week, and one of them is actually a two-parter, which we're going to split up. More about on that in a second. PJ in NYC says, quote, I was chatting with a major opera fan at the Met last night at the La Boheme intermission. You're going to get that audio in a second. This guy had been to 4 operas in the last 4 days, and apparently one of those was Champion, and he had been at the fight between Emile Griffith and Benny Perret. And apparently in the crowd, everybody knew what was going on. They were stopping. They wanted the ref to stop the fray. Perret went down, didn't get up. Paramedics apparently put him on a gurney and wheeled him 3 blocks down 8th Avenue to the hospital.
Wow.
Jesus.
I thought that was crazy.
That's wild.
This is what PJ thought of the Zeffirelli Bohème.
Oh, Opera Box Score, the memories. I remember all the productions in the past of seeing La Bohème at the Met with the Zeffirelli production. It is a thrill to be back. It's a beautifully exciting Tuesday night. The house is really on fire. Everyone's enjoying every second of this. The arias and all the stuff from Bohème, of course, you can't go wrong there. The singing is wonderful. We're enjoying Silvia D'Eramo making her big moment, her big debut, really, on the Met stage. I've seen her sing in recital in other places. I've met her once. Very exciting to see Silvia kind of have a big moment on the stage. Of course, I don't need to tell you anything about the production or any of the highlights. It's just embedded in all of our DNA at this point, particularly this production, the Zeffirelli production. I hope they never, ever change it. It's like an grand old dame, right? As they say in sports, Juventus. They call her the grand old lady, and in this case, I think this is kind of one of the grand old ladies of the opera. Thanks for listening. I'm excited to report to you always. It's another great night here at the Metropolitan Opera.
Goodbye, Opera Box Score.
That's Finn saying goodbye. We'll talk again.
Look, I love PJ. Otherwise, I wouldn't have him on the show the whole time.
We love PJ.
Here's where we're going to have to disagree. I don't think Zeffirelli should be in anyone's DNA. Like, I'm just so allergic to those productions. I get his point, but, like, he and I would need to have a little chat about whether or not those productions have or even had merit at any point.
Well, we can put you both in the champion boxing ring and see what happens.
That I would definitely lose, I think. Probably. And Niusha, also at NYC, they wrote in, they've corresponded with us before, and responded to both Champion and Lohengrin at the Met. Now, their Lohengrin response is complex, and we're going to save that part for next show so we can give it the time that it deserves. On Champion, they say, quote, considering how experimental it was with a lot of choreography and professional dancers and its diverse cast of racial and gender identities, I wasn't expecting to see it at the Met. They go on to say, Ryan Speedagree was brilliant and otherworldly beautiful as the young Emil. I think Oliver would have liked seeing him in the boxing ring finding other beautiful men.
Not just Oliver.
Yeah. And then they go on to say, Yannick Nézet-Séguin entered the orchestra pit in black silk boxing robes.
Hot.
I had not. I think even I would be a little excited about that.
A little Twitter padded.
I think that's cool. I'll save that for Yannick, and we're gonna get to him again later on the show. That's guts. That's guts. Let's get to that part right now. 2-minute drill.
This just in, the 2-minute drill.
All right, listen up. Here's everything you need to know about what happened in Operaland this week.
The official album of the coronation is already out, released the same day the crown jewels touched Charles III's royal little head. Coronation album, a new work composed by Andrew Lloyd Webber, is featured, as well as all music played during the event. Singers of the coronation included Sir Bryn Terfel, Pretty Yende, and Roderick Williams, as well as conductors John Elliott Gardner and Antonio Papano.
Washington National Opera is distancing itself from season sponsor General Dynamics, a military contractor, after announcing the premiere of Grounded, an opera exploring the psychological toll of drone warfare next season. The creative team said, quote, no sponsor or supporter of WNO had any involvement in the creation of Grounded or in the contents of its libretto. WNO has also changed its website to clarify General Dynamics as a WNO season sponsor rather than a presenting sponsor for the opera itself.
Central City Opera has offered a 4-year contract to AGMA, saying, quote, AGMA actively allowed its contract with Central City to expire last August, thereby leaving its members without an agreement. Should the labor union choose not to sign the contract offered by us, the two organizations will engage in federal mediation to reach resolution before the summer festival. There's no basis for AGMA's threat of a work stoppage.
Yannick Nézet-Séguin stopped a Philadelphia orchestra concert not once but twice due to ringing cell phones. There was no mention of what he was wearing at the time. Probably wasn't the silk boxing ropes, but maybe it was. The first interruption happened in a slow, quiet passage of Bruckner's Ninth, causing Nézet-Séguin to stop and restart the movement. When a phone rang out again around the same point, he turned to the audience and asked, "Can we live without the phone for just 1 damn hour?" The conductor told the Philadelphia Inquirer that he was fed up after hearing at least 4 rings before finally stopping the show.
Liverpool and Manchester are front-runners to be the new home of English National Opera after Arts Council England's decision to slash funding for the company earlier this year. ENO CEO Stuart Murphy said 3 finalist cities would be selected by the end of May, and added Liverpool and Manchester were, quote, strong contenders. Bristol, Birmingham, and Nottingham are also in the running.
Valery Gergiev has at least one fan, Vladimir Putin. Gergiev was awarded the, let me get this right, Order for Services to the Fatherland Second Degree by the Kremlin for, quote, an invaluable contribution to Russian culture and the arts. That's a lot of words and paperwork for, you're one of the only musicians who still talks to me after all those war crimes I did.
Oh, God. Sesto Quattrini will step down as artistic director of the Lithuanian National Opera at the end of June. He announced the departure with an open letter expressing his admiration for Lithuanian audiences and people. Quattrini will return next season as a guest conductor for Aida and the Tales of Hoffmann.
Well, it's the major award. The 2023 Pulitzer Prize for Music is going to Rhiannon Giddens and Michael Abels for their opera Omar, which premiered last year at Spoleto. The opera is based on a 1931 memoir of Ibn Said, a Muslim man who was captured in North Africa and enslaved in South Carolina.
Exit stage right, Grace Bumbry, who had one of the most illustrious operatic careers of the 20th century and was the first black singer to perform at the Paris Opera and the Bayreuth Festival, has died. She was 86 years old. Her death, following effects from a stroke in October, was confirmed in a statement by the Met, where she performed more than 200 times over 2 decades. OBS will dedicate a segment to Miss Bumbry on a future episode.
Czech mezzo-soprano Sonia Cervenia has died at the age of 97. Cervenia was a guest singer at the Berlin State Opera in East Berlin when she emigrated to the West in 1962 through the last open crossing in the Berlin Wall. The Iron Curtain kept her outside her country for 30 years. She was particularly known for Carmen, but played over 110 roles in her career, even performing as recently as last year in Rome.
And on this day, May 8th, in 1829, it was the birth of American composer and pianist Louis Moreau Gottschalk. In 1846, Oscar Hammerstein, the German-American opera composer and impresario, was born, not to be confused with the second version of that. In 1863, Italian soprano Cesira Ferrani was born. She created the role of Mimi in Bohème and Manon in Manon Lescaut by Puccini. In 1930, it was the birth of Irish soprano Heather Harper in Belfast. In 1932, Italian tenor Carlo Cossutta was born in Italy. And happy birthday to English soprano Felicity Lott, born on this day in 1947. We have some premieres here. In 1893, it was the first performance of Rachmaninoff's Aleko in Moscow. In 1894, the following year, Massenet's The Portrait of Manon was premiered in Paris. In 1946, Giancarlo Menotti's opera The Medium premiered in New York City. And in 1996, Lowell Lieberman's opera The Picture of Dorian Gray premiered at Monte Carlo Opera.
And that's your 2-minute drill.
That was a bit of Grace Bumbry singing the a duet with herself from Aida, which is just a wacky, wacky recording. Whenever a musician does something like that, it's always the highlight of an album. It's like, I'm just going to be both. And, you know, Grace Bumbry really was... What a career. If anyone deserved to do a duet with herself, it was her for sure.
Well, and that was one of her things. I mean, A of all, I am heartbroken. We just got this news. I haven't even processed my feelings about it yet. But that was something that she was really proud of, was the fact that her instrument, her voice, could sing both of these roles. She originally started out as a mezzo. Yeah. She ended up going up into things that were higher, but she never really lost like that spectrum. She's got the zenith and the nadir, so she really could do all of those things. And I am looking forward to having Matt on a future episode where he goes absolutely ham on another Grace Bumbry tribute. That will be coming shortly.
That is going to be do not miss. Weston, did you watch the coronation?
I did not.
Ashley, did you?
I watched bits and bops of it, and I saw a couple of clips afterwards. How about you?
I watched it 3 times.
I think that's a drink for all of you playing at home.
This is not surprising in any way, but go on.
So I got up at 4:30 Central.
Oh, lordy.
Now, did you watch it 3 times in a row, or did you have it on 3 screens in like surround sound, just bathing in it?
So I watched it live, and then Saturday, then Sunday. It's all a bit of a blur because I was up early. Sunday, I went back and I just watched all the music stuff. And then today, I found the official order of service, and then kind of had that on one half of my screen, and then the coronation on the other half. We will probably get another coronation in our lifetime, the folks of our generation. But many people will not. It's a very special event. And what makes it so special has to be the music. Look, I am not a royalist. I am not a monarchist. I don't even think King Charles is going to be that interesting a monarch. But the music at this event, it is the absolute best of English composers, British singers, at the absolute peak of their game. You speak about the Coronation album. I haven't gotten to that yet, but I will.
Well, the Coronation album, I'm looking at it on Spotify, and it is it's not just the music. It's the entire service. Eucharistic prayer, Lord's Prayer, the whole thing. It is 66 tracks long. But what I will tell you is that there is some singing, and I mean singing, on this album. So I think it's definitely worth your time to peek through, hit the highlights. But yeah, there are 66 tracks on this album.
It's a must hear for all you Zadok the Priest fans out there.
I mean, I love Zadok so much.
What opera was that from again, George?
It's Handel, Purcell, Gibbons, Walton, Perry. I mean, these are titans of British composition. The service did such a great job of spreading its languages across all the languages that are spoken in the UK, not just English. The real letdown, unsurprisingly, was Andrew Lloyd Webber's contribution.
Shocking.
It is not interesting. It is too low for the tenor section. You can hear the tenors straining to get down there. It was completely forgettable.
And I was really thrown off when the chandelier came crashing down on the royal family halfway through.
General Dynamics and Washington National Opera trying to sort stuff out here. I mean, look, we all know that the only things that matter in DC are politics, right? So obviously General Dynamics is going to throw in whatever fraction of their annual profits to support.
It's all about that military-industrial opera complex, I guess. This is kind of wild. I mean, I feel like my big take on the coronation, I feel like, is kind of related to the General Dynamics.
Okay, go on. I want to see
Just go on. Can't wait to see you thread this needle.
We're listening.
Well, so much of what we listen to in opera houses, in the so-called classical, Western art music world, is so tied to these large donors, right? These big, powerful, old forces that aren't necessarily relevant or are actively destructive to
Quite
the world
literally.
we live in.
Yeah.
And it's I think that's not a particularly spicy take, except to maybe some of our British listeners, for the coronation, but I don't think it's a very spicy take for people when it comes to General Dynamics. And I think the great irony is that General Dynamics has actually been helping fund WNO for almost 30 years now.
Yeah, it only came to a head when it turned out that they were going to do this opera, Grounded.
Exactly, which sounds like a pretty good opera. It's going to be, I think Emily D'Angelo is going to be in it, and she's great. But this is one of those things where it really throws that irony into stark relief. I always think that, the only reason that a lot of these big donors and big corporate entities, donate to the operas because they don't know what's actually being put on stage, and they don't know how subversive the arts can actually be. They just kind of assume this is entertainment for white, old, wealthy elites, which in many ways it unfortunately has been catered to those people. But I think that we really need to find a way to divest ourselves as an art form from oil companies, defense contractors, all this kind of thing. This is what
the Royal Opera House did. The Royal Opera House was being sponsored by Shell or BP, I think.
Yeah,
and they were like, no, we're not having that. anymore.
Yeah, and this is one of those. I get that it's difficult to fund your opera. It's such an expensive art form if you're doing it on a grand scale. I mean, unless you're doing like a storefront production. They can do
opera is about the damage, the collateral damage of drones in the form of PTSD. Does anyone really think General Dynamics is like trying to promote that narrative?
I mean, that's how you know the check was already written and deposited. Because if anybody at General Dynamics had actually done any homework, they probably would have yanked that funding right back.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I feel like a lot of the online outrage was partially because like, well, are they going to portray it in a bad light, in a good light rather, the drone warfare? I don't think that's going to be the case. No. But
no one's pro drone ever.
But it is a matter
of
like
the bagpipes, I guess. But anyway,
it is the hand that is feeding WNO, and there are other hands that are similarly nefarious, I'm sure, especially when you're talking about Washington D.C. And it's just one of those things. We need to find alternative modes of funding, ideally as democratized as possible. And this is just one of, I think, an increasing number of stories we'll see about big harmful donors funding our favorite opera companies. And it's kind of a shame.
Well, the one thing I will say is that you can tell that, I mean, they're doing a little bit of acrobatics to try to change the wording of the sponsorships, but WNO isn't backing down from actually doing the piece. So in a way, it's like, I am going to take your money and then I'm going to shit talk you. So in some ways, it's to be applauded.
I respect that to a certain extent. I mean, it's we'll see how far they go. And also, like, I will say, like, I think there is a lot. I don't think there's like direct pressure on them to be like, change this to make the drone warfare sound positive or whatever. But when you're in these situations, there's like almost a subconscious like pressure to like not go too far, to not push the envelope too far. I would love them to just go like absolutely just like go to the wall and just tear General Dynamics specifically apart. I don't know if they could get away with that, but like that would be the only thing that would make me feel better about this, if they really use their money to stick it to them specifically. Yeah. But we'll see what happens. I think independent of the funding, it has the potential to be a really interesting show. We'll see what happens. We'll see if they stay with the funding going forward.
Apparently, we're going to see what happens to this Arts Council England ENO.
Yeah.
I mean, what is this?
Showdown.
The Olympics? Like, we're trying to pick like an Olympic host city. It's like, well, these are the sort of finalists. I do not understand. Liverpool and Manchester are under consideration because they're very big cities and they're for the north. They have active cultural lives. They don't need to add in an opera company to like improve themselves. It's the same with Birmingham. I'm impressed that Bristol's in the running. I think that'd be an excellent choice. It's too far south in the country. It's too close to London. But the way that this is being handled is just so grotesque. It's almost like a sort of a popularity competition or something.
Yeah.
It's gonna. I don't know if it's gonna end in tears. The Central City Agma thing, it is going to end in tears. I said this at the end of last year that this is my prediction, that there wouldn't be a CCO season this summer. And I'm going to be vindicated based on the 2-minute drill extra that we just had on the show. You're going to see it is not going to end well.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. This is not a proposal that is like, we think we might actually be able to get them to agree on this. This is a, double bird kind of statement from CCO against AGMA. I don't think it's going to happen either.
Federal mediation, that could take months. That could take absolute months. It's early May.
Yeah, and that stuff's supposed to start when? In 40, 45 minutes. But yeah, and the thing is the date on the press release is later than when it got released on the website. I think it was postmarked May 5th or something, and then it was actually put out a day or two before that.
Whoops.
Yeah, oops poops. I mean, listen, we are pro-union.
They actually briefly took down the post as well, I will say. When they initially posted it And when you put it in the link to our document, there was a period of at least a day where I clicked on it and it was a 404 message.
Which is exactly why I screenshotted it when I saw it. Now, listen, at the end of the day, we are a union household over here. I am an AGMA member, so I will always be fighting on the side of performers for living wages. But this is, I mean, the posturing that was put in this statement was borderline laughable.
Yeah.
Everything about the biggest chunk of these negotiations has been public. So to allege that they just let this contract expire so that they could go into this big, knockdown, drag out nanoseconds before a summer festival is supposed to start. No, I don't buy it.
Good call. Bad call. On Opera Box Score.
Wow, one of those shows where so many of our stories we got lucky and they came out on the day we taped. We did miss a couple things from a couple weeks ago. I'm going to get to that in my good call, bad call. But I'll make some space first. Weston Williams.
I have a good call. It's kind of a cute little story from the New York Times about the children's book author Mo Willems.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Who I'm sure you're very familiar with by now, George.
I've read his books approximately 10,000 times.
Well, good news. He is getting into libretto writing, which I think is just so charming.
Yes.
Because, I think children's book authors honestly would make such great librettists because everything has to be spoken aloud and has to sound good and like convey a lot with not very much text, and that is perfect for a libretto. And this is just a great little story talking about Willem's little passion for classical music and opera, and how he's starting to get involved in writing some like little one act operas, and I think it's great. I think it's a lot of fun.
Well, he could do the scenic design as well. I mean, if David Hockney can design,
he could do anything.
He's such a good wordsmith. He's sort of just on the hill. He's at the bottom of the hill, approaching like Stephen Sondheim in terms of Willem's ability to find rhymes. Ashley Hardgrave.
You can always count on me for some musical but decidedly not operatic content, and today is going to be no different. I am going to recommend an album to you, and I'm going to charge listeners, and I'm going to charge you, Weston and George, to check into this. It's going to be an album by a gentleman named T-Pain. Yes, of Buy You a Drank fame.
Yeah.
I unironically love T-Pain. I love him so much it hurts. He's an incredible musician. If you have not seen his Tiny Desk concert, it's wonderful.
It's really good.
People know him for this auto-tune. The only reason he did that is because he needed a gimmick when people weren't paying attention to his legitimate voice and musicianship. So, the album that I want to recommend is something called On Top of the Covers. It actually came out maybe about a month ago, maybe the end of March. It's all cover songs, and it is absolutely incredible. He covers Frank Sinatra. He covers Journey. He covers Black Sabbath. It is incredible. The man has range. The man has a good voice. And he's just such a lovely human. His podcasts are hilarious. He's a good musician. He doesn't get enough credit. So this is me cheering for T-Pain in the corner and telling you to listen to On Top of the Covers. It's great.
Bad call from me. One of the things we did miss because we were off for the OBS retreat, which was yikes, was Jerry Springer died on April 27th. That's not new news. That's not really related to opera, unless, of course, it's Jerry Springer, the opera.
Yes. Also, I have a double connection here because I used to, fun fact, work in retail at a Barnes & Noble. And Jerry Springer at this particular Barnes & Noble was a repeat customer. And it was always funny because whenever we'd have someone new, they'd be over the radio being like, I think Jerry Springer's in here. That's always what I think about. It goes that and then the opera that's about him, then everything else he's did.
That's right. Well, he went to Northwestern and he lived in Evanston, Illinois.
Yeah,
I think maybe when he passed away, he was living in Evanston.
He was in the burbs. Yeah, he has a lot of Chicago connections. Yeah. His television show taped here for years.
Taped here, on North Columbus Ave, I think it was. Jerry Springer the Opera, I will never forget it. The summer of 2002, I was in London and I got to see it at the National Theatre. It was and is and will be one of the best shows I think I have ever seen. Talk about a Spotify album. That's what I might have to dial up after I finish with the coronation. That's it for this week's edition of America's Talk radio show about opera. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Send us a voice memo or email us your hot takes, operaboxscore@gmail.com. And you can find links to stuff we've talked about at our website, operaboxscore.com. And that is also where you get to put your money where our mouths are. Think about giving back to the OBS on our donate page. Your announcer is Norm Waddell, your creative consultant is Oliver Camacho, and your audio editor is Weston Williams. For co-hosts Matt Cummings and Ashley Hardgrave, I'm George Cedarquist, asking you to continue the conversation about opera with your mother, assuming you haven't murdered her with the axe you have buried in the backyard. We're back with an all-new show next week when we go inside the huddle with baritone Ryan McKinney, who's part of the U.S. tour of Jake Heggie's Music of Remembrance. Plus, you get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and more... What did I say about that damn phone? Join us.